Good morning, Mata Nui! Welcome back to another episode of the Barraki Talk Show. We're your hosts, the Mielik brothers,
Jacob, Samuel,
Thomas, and we're glad you're joining us today as we talk our way through the weird and wondrous world of Bionicle. But first, coming up on the Barraki Talk Show.
And if you somehow manage to collect all 8 variants of all 6 colors, you are officially halfway there.
Also, I think it's funny that when they're rolling, they kind of look like boulders. Kohatu's like,
They're just going out doing their thing, and it's like, yeah, it happens to be destructive, right? They happen to be destroying things, and they don't know how to reconcile that because it's like they don't have this critical thinking that the Toa have.
All that and more coming up on the Barraki Talk Show. On today's episode of the Barraki Talk Show, we'll be discussing the Bohrok, what they do, what they are, and how the Toa Mata are able to fight them. Starting off, Samuel Mielik, what do you know about the Bohrok?
That's a great question. I know just a little bit about them. Like, they were originally... So they're used by Makuta to go after... to cause problems for the Toa, right? But they were... that wasn't their initial purpose, right? Like, they weren't created by Makuta for this evil plan. They were meant to like cleanse. That's their purpose, right?
Yes.
It was like to actually cleanse. I don't know if it wasn't Mata Nui specifically, right? It was just that they were there to like reset stuff.
Correct. Yeah, because unlike the Rahi that he had the infected masks on, the Bohrok are not under his direct control at all. They're more a wild force that he set loose.
Yeah.
Right.
So that makes them particularly interesting because they're not just being malicious for the sake of being malicious. They're just doing their job, essentially. And so I like that aspect of them because it's kind of like, oh, okay, well, how are they going to deal with this? Because it's not strictly a force that can be reasoned with or that is just evil at heart. They're just doing what they are designed to do.
Yep.
But I mean,
it must be clean.
Yeah.
They're just working 9 to 5.
I know that they have the prana, right? Yep. Is what the Bohrok have in the brains, the organisms like that control the rest of the Bohrok body. I don't know how.
Yeah, the Bohrok are actually just shells, and the Krana are the beings that actually control the shells.
Yeah, so the Krana are like the only organic and sapient thing about the Bohrok. The main part of the Bohrok is the Bohrok shell, and it's an insectoid, purely mechanical creature. When you put a Krana into it, it becomes active and is just referred to as a Bohrok. So the Krana is like, it has the same texture and movement as a slug, so it can actually crawl around, but it's purely organic, and it can latch on to either Bohrok or where masks would normally go on sentient beings like Matoran and whatever, and it can actually mind control them if it's on someone else. So the Bohrok shells are actually designed to where they can launch the Krana at people, which will knock off their masks, and the Krana will latch on.
I always wondered why they had that feature in the actual physical set, so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yep.
That's largely what I know about them. I also know that they like rolled. That was their primary mode of transportation. Is they rolled around, and it looked cool because it was like fun idea.
It's a lot better for them to roll around because they got short little stubby legs.
Yeah, they do have short little legs.
I like their short stubby legs and T-Rex arms. Also, I think it's funny that when they're rolling, they kind of look like boulders. Kohatu's like,
I've been training my whole life for this moment.
He sees the brown ones, he's like,
So, the Bohrok, besides just being like insectoid mechanical guys, how they actually start to cleanse the island, right, which is kind of vague until you learn more about it later on, is that they each have an elemental power related to their color. Unique, I know. Now, the elemental powers don't directly correspond to what they do for like Matoran or Toa. The other complicated thing about Bohrok is each Krana has a designation. So it'll be like Krana Za or Krana Va or whatever. And each type of Krana, of which there are 8, has also a unique ability that it grants to the Bohrok. So think of it like a mask power almost, right? Where it's just an addendum to any base template of elemental power. So you could have like a Parok, which is the stone Bohrok that has a Krana Za, which allows it to fly, right? So the Bohrok are really hard to adapt to because they can actually switch out Krana at any time. So it's like if they need to assault something that they need to fly to, they can just switch in those. If they need better tactics, they switch in those Kranas. So all the Krana powers are, the first one is complex planning / commanding. This makes a swarm leader Bohrok who can like make strategies and plan really well. The other one is the swarm commander, which is like, think of it like a lieutenant in an army. It can make basic plans, but it's the only Bohrok that can actually use telepathy to non-Bohrok beings. Because since the Bohrok work as a hive mind, all the Krana can communicate with each other, as well as the Bohrok Va, which are purely mechanical, and they can communicate with the Barrog as well, who can control them and are the Bohrok queens. So with this Krana, they can actually talk to non-Bohrok beings, and that's the main form of communication with non-Bohrok. The third one is limited flight. So this is useful because they can just kind of pick up and fly and then set back down. And they use this to actually attack Ga Koro. To great effect, actually. They were going to win, but we'll get more to that later. The fourth one is strong shielding. So kind of like the Kanohi Hao to Ahu's mask. The fifth one is tunneling. So this allows them to tunnel super effectively, like Onua levels of effectiveness. The sixth one is radar. This grants them radar, pretty standard power. The seventh one is strength. So this doesn't give them like Parok levels of power, but it does make them much physically stronger. And then the eighth is infrared vision. To sum up, those are the available Krana powers, and they can be paired with any Bohrok shell to create a unique Bohrok type combination. The elemental powers are... Some of them are mostly what the normal power does, some of them are not. So
like acid.
Yeah, for acid instead of air. It's like, why? They're both green, I guess. Instead of air, they have acid, so that's the green Bohrok. They're called the Levok, right? Then there is the water Bohrok, which are called the Galok, and they can't generate water like how Gali can, and they can't really manipulate the water as it exists. All they can do is absorb water and then shoot that water back out again. So they can dry things up by absorbing it in, or they can like essentially do pressure washer style things with the water that they've absorbed. The fire Bohrok are called the Tanakh, and theirs is just straight up what Tahu can do. Shoot fire, absorb fire. That's it. Same with the Karok or the Korok, which are the ice Bohrok. They can absorb ice, shoot ice. And this is actually pretty effective. They straight up froze Lua and before he could really react. So it's like, dang, pretty powerful. Bohroks also come in swarms, so keep that in mind. It's like having not as powerful as a Toa, but pretty close in like the thousands. So they're really effective. The other one is the the Parok, which have seismic powers. So they can't kick boulders, like a real stone element would. But they can like fragment things. So like if they hit a boulder with their power, it will shatter. Then the Nuvok, which are the Onu Bohrok, the earth ones, they have weakening, which is really vague on what it does. Generally what they use is use it at like the base of structures and collapse it. But it's not as defined as the other ones, and the other ones aren't even that well defined. So it's whatever. So those are all the Bohrok powers, but there's also one additional element to the Bohrok swarms, and that's the Bohrok Va. So these are like tiny little Bohrok, and they have a Bohrok shield for a head, right? And then they have the two little eyes, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they also have like a little backpack that carries Krana.
Yeah. So it's like, because the main way the Toa defeat the Bohrok is by like trapping them and then just ripping open the top and collecting the Krana, right? The Bohrok Va will go over to those empty shells and put new Krana into it because they have more Krana than they do Bohrok shells. So anytime, or if they need to switch out, they'll be the Bohrok Va will be the ones to put in the new Krana when they don't need the old Krana. They're actually pretty simple. They can communicate telepathically to the Balrog and the other Bohrok, but they're actually purely mechanical, and they run on actual AI rather than sapience, which a lot of the other Matoran universe residents.
Which makes them effective, but not very creative.
Correct. They don't have any problem-solving skills. They're more like the Boxor than they are like a Matoran, which is actually interesting because when the Bohrok are defeated and there's no more telepathic signals going out, the Matoran actually use the Bohrok Va to help rebuild the villages, since they are simple mechanical machines.
Yeah. It's actually interesting because in the 2001 wave of Bionicle, and you actually do see it a little bit continuing, there's a lot of just like simple AI machines, because there's the Boxer, there's the Va, and then there's also the Exotoa.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
So yeah, I do like the simple AI mixed with like the rural village aesthetic. It's a cool, unique flavor that you don't see in many things. There's something about them that I like about the Bohrok that I can't really describe. I'm like, I don't know what it is. It's either like the swarm tactics.
I think it's the swarming mechanics, because it's like you have these like pretty powerful individual beings, but then in swarms, it's just like they feel like an overwhelming force in a lot of ways, but not an unbeatable force.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're more like a force of nature than they are like a true enemy.
That's why I kind of liked, that's what I like about them is, and why I made a point when you were asking me what I know, is that they aren't malicious, right? It's not like they're out to be evil. It's just they are essentially a force of nature, in the sense of they are trying to restore things to their natural order. They're trying to put things back the way they are supposed to be, or how they think they're, how they were created to think things were supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so I like that, because it's almost like they're herds of emu, right? It's like
over the innocent Australian wilderness.
yeah, they're just going out doing their thing, and it's like, yeah, it happens to be destructive, right? They happen to be destroying things, and they don't know how to reconcile that, because it's like they don't have this critical thinking that the Toa have, and the Toa are like, what are you doing? This is all wrong. And it's like they're just doing what they're made to do. It's like emu go out and destroy things, and it's like the farmers are all like, oh my gosh, the emu are wrecking everything, and the emu are just like, I'm just doing emu things, So I think that's kind of cool, because it gives them this very natural feeling where it's like their presence is just neat, because they're not out to get something. They're just part of the universe.
Yeah. Well, and it makes for really cool situations, because every time the Toa lose, the Bohrok don't try to kill them. They just move on to go cleanse more stuff, right? So it leaves the Toa humiliated, but like still able to fight. And it makes the Bohrok really interesting, because like, are the Toa not enough of a threat for the Bohrok to consider them an obstacle that needs to be cleansed, right? And as you see in the events, they actually aren't. Like, the Toa get a lot of victories, but the island is losing. Like, they lose entire villages. Mountains get flattened. It's crazy the amount of destruction the Bohrok do cause. So I always like that, because like, if things had continued without them beating the Balrog, they would have lost, right? So that's one other thing to discuss. The Balrog are these two like dinosaur-looking things that are the Bohrok queens. They're the ones that mentally control the entire swarms. They're the ones that are in telepathic communication with all of them. They have a few powers. Mainly, they can make illusions within a short radius, right? If you believe the illusions, they manifest like they would be physically there. So if they put an illusionary wall and you think there's a wall there, it acts like an unbreakable wall.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So they trick the Toa that way. Also, if they're together, they become literally invincible, which is a really useful trait to have.
Yeah, there's like an actual like shield that forms around them.
Yeah.
Which is never really totally explained why that happens.
It's literal plot armor.
It is literal plot armor.
As opposed to the Exo Toa suits, which are just plot armor. Literal plot armor. Lots of plot armor near the back half of this story. But it's cool plot armor.
It is cool. We forgive it because it's cool.
Yeah. And they also have elemental powers corresponding to the Toa's elemental powers. So they're stacked to the gills. They're crazy. So that's the end of like the high level overview of the Bohrok.
My one question, I guess, is why do the Barrok look so different from the Bohrok? Like, were the Barrok designed in conjunction with the Bohrok, or were they like some sort of other creature that just evolved to take control of the swarms?
So they were made to control the Bohrok, and they were made to also make the Krana. So they're not related to Bohrok in any way except control over them.
Yeah. I guess I just wonder, because, like, I don't know. It just seems like the design language is so different between the Barrok and the Bohrok.
Yeah, they look much more like the original Rahi than they do Bohrok.
Which is just an interesting choice.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they did that. So, the events of how the Bohrok invasion actually played out is that once the Toa Mata beat Makuta and he set off the signal, Bohrok started pouring out of Bohrok nests all over the island in every wahi. How no one had found these before, I don't know. Maybe they were all in a Po coral cave. Where all the Toa were when they came up from fighting Makuta, they were in Pa Koro. A bunch of Bohrok came out. It was mostly Korok and Kanok, and they just annihilated the Toa and like cleansed the entire area around Ta Koro. So everyone was like, what the heck is going on?
Is that why all the trees in Takoro burned down?
No, that's because they live next to a volcano.
Fair enough. Carry on.
Yeah. Also, Makuta was doing a bunch of attacks that withered away a lot of the Tawahi landscape. So, Makuta's kind of a jerk.
Really?
Yeah, I know. It
What a
surprised
surprise.
me too.
Yeah.
I was like, oh no, popular favorite character, Makuta. So, after they moved on from Takoro, they didn't assault the village itself, luckily, because it's surrounded by lava. They moved on to Pokoro as the next area of attack, and boy, did they try to hit it hard. So, 4 of the Toa were going to Pokoro to defend it. It was Gali, Lua, Onua, and Pohatu, obviously. And they saw a big swarm of Bohrok coming to attack. So, they're like, we got to get a plan. What Onua did is he dug a tunnel. There's a big old canyon leading to Pokoro. There's a lot of canyons leading to Pokoro. So he dug a tunnel through that canyon all the way to Gawahi, and a bunch of water drained in. Kopaka put an ice wall, stopped the water from flowing out. So when all the Bohrok came into a tunnel, Pohatu used his boulder kicking skills to break the ice, and it like drowned all the Bohrok. So Gali swam in and just like started collecting the Krana like crazy. Unfortunately, they were all Tanakh, and they started boiling the water, so Gali had to hightail it out of there. And then the other Bohrok kind of swooped in. They had to retreat farther back to Pokoro. But most of they were scattered enough, were able to be taken out before they could get there. But then, after that attack, another attack came, and they were all heading right towards Pokoro. The only reason they weren't able to get there is because there were 2 giant, essentially Argonath statues in front of Pokoro, and a Matoran who was, it was Hafu, the Matoran. He's just like a normal villager. He managed to destroy the bottoms of the statues and like collapse it in front of the gates of Pokoro. So Pohatu managed to swoop in and save the day because they couldn't get to the village. And you're like, okay, dang. They must really hate Pokoro. Because after that, another wave of Bohrok came in. And this time, everyone was like, okay, we got to get out of here. So they just straight up evacuated Pokoro, and it got decimated.
Was this the Lee-Rock? Was it Lee-Rock that came in that time?
It was Porok.
It was Porok both times.
Porok and Levok for the final assault.
Yeah.
So they were able to burn through and shatter through and just annihilate it. The Levok are actually some of the most effective ones in the Bohrok.
Acid is
I would
crazy.
imagine, being able to throw acid would be very helpful.
Yeah, because they can dig, they can do whatever. It's, insane. So, after this, they attacked Onu Koro, and this was led by Galak and Nuvok. And what they did is they, obviously inspired by the goat Onua. The Galak started flooding the Onu-Koro mines, right? Just like they'd flooded the canyon. And so it actually filled up the Great Mine in Onu-Koro, so they couldn't get any more light stones or whatever. And then a bunch of Nuvoks started weakening all the tunnels around Onu-Koro. And so Onua was like, we got to get the heck out of here. So they eventually evacuated as water started filling up the entire cavern the village was in. 3 Matoran were stuck in a small cave near the surface with trapped Bohrok. They took out the Krana and reassembled the Bohrok into the first Boxor. Nupru was one of those Matoran, and so he made the first Boxor, and they were able to dig their way out. The Boxor would become a very important tool for the Matoran to fight against the Bohrok after that. And Nupru will never be important later again.
Yeah, you never heard from again.
Yeah.
Much like Hafu.
Yeah. Well, you do never. Yeah. So, the third village to be attacked was Kokoro, except that they were all searching around in Kauai. They couldn't find it, and they just left. It's like, even the Bohrok didn't care about Kokoro. Cleanse everything, except for that.
Probably fine.
Yeah. See, they would have attacked it, but the writers forgot Kokoro existed.
Oh, dang.
Yeah.
The Kokoro slander goes hard.
Yeah. Eventually, they did remember near the end of the war that it existed, and they just wiped it. It wasn't hard at all. Classic Kokoro. Sanctum guard my behind. Anyway, the fourth village to be attacked was Lee Koro, and it was overrun like the fastest. It was annihilated super fast by Levok, primarily, and every single Matoran and the Turaga had a Krana on their face. So when Lua got there, like, hey, come join us, he's like, what the heck? And then wham! Krana to the face. And then that's, of course, when Onua, the goat, had to come and talk him out of it and save Lua.
I feel like they were overrun the quickest because all the others were negotiating with the Bohrok, but then when the Lematoran were trying to speak to them, the Bohrok were like, we can't understand you with whatever this weird language is that's coming out of your mouth.
The Levok heard 1 second of tree speak.
They're like, this place is going down.
They hated it so much they had to just shut them up by any means necessary.
So,
iconic.
Yeah. It was retaken, though, with Onua because he lured out a ton of the Bohrok and villagers, and he had a bunch of Boxors used by Matoran in the ground. So when they came up, the Boxors dug to the surface, and the Matoran and Bohrok fell into the pits, so they could just take off the Krana.
Huh.
That's a pretty good thing from Onua.
Yep.
Great strategy, I'm telling you.
Absolute legend.
Really quickly, do they have to does someone have to physically rip off the Krana, or is there something that would make them like want to come off their wear, like if they were heated up, or if they, like, is there an elemental way or some way without physically grabbing the Krana that would make it detach from its current host?
So if you have enough willpower, you can take it off yourself, but there's no elemental way to do it because it'd probably just burn. They never tried it, is what I should say, because it's really dangerous because it's literally on their face. Right. Also, the Krana can inflict mental pain on you if you're too crazy about it, so that's why ripping them off is the best option. So during this time, the Toa are like, okay, we can't just keep fighting a defensive battle because we're going to lose, right? As evidenced by losing all the villages they have already. So they were told by the Turaga that they needed to gather each type of Krana from each element of Bohrok. So they needed to get all the 8 types of Krana from Tanakh, all the 8 types of Krana from Galak, all the 8 types of Krana from Urok, like that. So once they finally had all the Krana from their various victories, they went to the Ta Koro cave where the Bohrok first emerged, and they went into a small cavern that they'd come out of. In it was little niches. The niches were carved to fit the Krana of each type. So they put all the Krana around it, and that's when new pathways opened up deeper into the Bohrok nest proper. In these tunnels, they found the Exo Toa armor, which, as stated before, is kind of literal plot armor because it's... I don't know how to describe Exo-Toa armor. How would you describe it, Jacob?
So the Exo-Toa armor is basically these robots that can function on their own with like a limited AI, sort of like a Bohrok Va, but probably even more limited than that.
Yeah, they're mainly used to like guard things.
Yeah, but then they can also like house a Toa actually in them. Hence the Exo-Toa armor.
Yeah.
And what they do is they enhance the actual physical strength and speed and like kind of all the actual physical stats of the Toa, and then also give them like a powerful like rocket blast as well that they can use.
Yeah.
But the Exo-Toa unfortunately reduce or actually completely negate the ability to use elemental powers whilst piloting.
Yeah, so it's kind of a trade-off. They used it to traverse through most of the Bohrok nest because it's a huge advantage, but they did encounter like traps and illusions that the Balrog could make. And also during this time, everyone was pretty wary of Lua, who, since he had the Chrono on, he was actually beginning to... The illusions would affect him more strongly, and he could hear the thoughts of the Balrog trying to get him to betray the Toa, right? So Kopaka especially was like, I don't trust this guy. He's kind of whack, right? And he was right, because Lua wasn't even trusting himself. He's like, yeah, probably a liability.
The smartest thing Lua's ever said.
Yeah, because after he got the Chrono off, he really straightened out. He's like, okay, I need to get my act together, because my whole village got destroyed like super easy, right? So he becomes much more competent and self-aware after this point. So they do eventually get through the tricks and traps, and they fight the Balrog proper. And it's going really well with the Exo-Toa armor. So they're cornering the Balrog, but they back up and eventually become invincible because they're near each other. So it's like, okay, we're getting worn down because they can shoot infinite amounts of illusions and elements at us. So they take off the Exo-Toa armor, and they all shoot their elemental powers at once. And what this ends up doing is creating a Toa seal around the Balrog, which cuts them off completely telepathically from all of the Bohrok and keeps them trapped in like a tiny little cube, essentially. So
I'm sure this is also the last time we'll ever hear of a Toa seal.
Yes, Toa seals will not be relevant again. So this stops the Bohrok invasion.
But Toa sea lions, that's a whole different story.
Toa walruses, man, they go crazy.
So this was good because Ga Koro was actually being attacked by the aforementioned flying Bohrok. When they were fortifying the village, they're like, oh man, all the Pomatoran were going to Ga Koro. So like, we need to really fortify. So they put like thousands of sharpened bamboo sticks around the beach. So if the Bohrok tried to go in, they just impale themselves. I'm like, that's pretty hardcore. Anyway, but the Bohrok just flew onto their lily pads, and they were fighting them off with like spears and whatever, and they were just about to lose the main hut when all the Bohrok shut down from the Balrog being defeated. So they held out just long enough. Props to Ga Koro and their unnamed military. Not the Sanctum Guard, you might notice.
You could tell it wasn't the Sanctum Guard because they won.
Yeah, because they existed.
Got him.
So the last major event to happen in the war is after the Balrog were defeated, all the Toa fell into tubes that went straight into energized protodermis.
Of course.
That was just hiding underneath the Balrog for some reason. Which actually, they used it, the energized protodermis, to make Krana. So that's why it was actually there for lore reasons. Once they hit the energized protodermis, since they were destined to do so, they became Toa Nuva, which are just like massive upgrades over their normal Toa selves. But we'll get more into that in the Toa Nuva specific episode.
I've always been confused why there's just random energized protodermis down there. The real question is, why do they just fall through the tubes? But
no clue.
Yeah. I guess it just... Destiny.
Yeah. Greg writing into the story like plot armor, tubes. Okay. And then it gets even crazier because once they become Toa Nuva, you know all the golden masks they collected? All the golden masks that aren't their primary one teleport away and back into hiding spots.
Because why not?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it happens at the beginning of the story as well because Takua, he's in a Bohrok nest when they first get activated. He had an item on him that allowed him to teleport back to Pokoro. Like, wow, you like teleportation, huh? So
It's really handy.
yeah, easy. It's like, oh, they need to be here. Teleportation. You are now entering the Chronicler's Corner. The following content may not be appropriate for viewers unaware or unacquainted with the wider Bionicle lore, as major plot points and reveals will be spoiled. If you wish to avoid this section, skip to this time in the podcast.
35 minutes, 38 seconds.
Viewer discretion is advised. So, moving on to the spoilers. The Krana are made by the Great Beings by dipping leftover junk from making Matoran into energized protodermis. Somehow that made Krana. It also made Zyglak. So it's like 50-50 Krana, 50-50 Zyglak, which is pretty bad. Eventually they made a more stable version that they taught the Bohrok how to make, which... no clue what materials it uses. I'm guessing just random junk that they just dip into energized protodermis, and that has a 100% chrono rate. So, much improvement. Also, the Exotoa armor, as we mentioned before, was put there by the Brotherhood of Makuta to guard in case the Bohrok were awakened early. Obviously, since Pterodax set it off early, he didn't activate the Exotoa, which is why they were there, but not fighting on the autonomous settings. So I was like, oh, that's actually a pretty good way to fill it in. The Bohrok themselves were made to remove anything that would inhibit getting the GSR from getting out of its camouflage. So its camouflage system covers any exposed parts. They're there to make sure there's no living beings or like any superstructures that would prevent him from getting up before. So that's why they have to be released before he can be awakened. Also, the Bohroks were based off of the Great Beings designs of the Batera, which they made on Spherous Magma, which, if you don't know, the Batera were made to stop the core war that was happening on Bara Magma. However, this was a stupid move because the Batera were their arguably biggest failed experiment because they went crazy, out of control, and just started killing indiscriminately. And that didn't even end the war. People were just like, okay, now we got to fight these evil, uncontrollable robot things. The Batera also almost killed the entire species of the Skrull later on. So I don't know why they decided that was a great design. Let's make more of those.
The Great Beings are not exactly the most stable people of all time.
They're the Great Beings, not the highly intelligent beings.
Great does not refer to brain power in this instance.
Yes. And finally, Bohrok shells. So the Krana are created by dipping stuff in energized protodermis. Bohrok shells are created when Avmatoran that are destined to evolve into them. And as soon as they are evolved into them from wherever they are, they're teleported instantly to Bohrok nests.
Yay, teleportation!
Yeah, I'm like, I gotta love me some teleportation.
Craig and his teleportation. Man.
Yep. And interestingly enough, the Unika can devolve a Bohrok shell back into an Avmatoran.
That's cool.
Or can evolve an Avmatoran into a Bohrok shell.
Wait, who can do that?
The Mask of Life.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
So I'm like, if you ever get a Mask of Life and a Bohrok shell and you want an Avmatoran, you know what to do. So that's the end of the lore section, unless there are closing comments.
It's just so weird to me. The whole Avmatoran thing transforming into Bohrok shells is just... why?
I know, I'm like, what would prompt you to do this?
I don't understand it. It literally does not make any sense.
Especially because there's no need to explain where the Bohrok come from, right?
Like, they could just be built.
Yeah,
right?
You could just say the Bohrok build the shells as well.
Yeah.
Is that a crazy thing to say?
Well, especially since it's particularly weird because the shells themselves are just mechanical, right? Yeah. So you're taking a biomechanical being, right, and turning them into just a mechanical shell, and it's like, and yet somehow you can undo that. So
yeah, not to mention you could put like the Krana on like a Boxor and it'd work just as fine. Or since they can also inhabit purely organic beings or biomechanical beings, you could just have them dip other stuff in energized protodermis and make like little Matoran that you could just put Krana on as well.
Yeah.
It's like I don't understand any of this.
We don't question it. We listen and we don't judge.
Simply say love is not canon and move on.
But wheels.
Also not canon.
But doors.
Also not good. Sad to say.
The other thing where it's like, are there more wheels or doors in the world? Greg Farshey was like, how about neither?
He really wanted an answer to that question.
I'm gonna make a meme. You know the mahogany doors video?
Mahogany doors.
I'm just gonna make a Bionicle one where they all have Bionicle masks over the guy's face, and it'll just be like mahogany, mahogany, mahogany.
Boom. Mahogany.
Oh wow.
Mahogany.
Okay, I've got
Mahogany.
what?
Mahogany.
The best part about doors not being canon is there's literally a door in Wave 1, the giant door that Makuta has in his lair.
Not to mention that the Mantis crabs have wheels.
We don't tell you.
Yeah.
Okay, so the sets. You are now entering the set and technical portion of the podcast. This is where we examine the real-world production and set design of the LEGO Bionicle toy line. All right, well, the Bohrok really... So if the Toa kicked off the trend, tradition, whatever you want to call it...
Wait. Just like Pohatu, they kicked off the tradition. Womp womp womp.
The tradition is boulder.
Yeah. Much like a boulder, the Toa kicked it off. There we go.
You're so dumb. All right. Yeah, so the Bohrok kind of kicked off that tradition of the primary antagonists being a group of 6, much like the Toa, with the same or similar color scheme to the Toa, and being like almost direct counterparts to them, right? So, like with the Bohrok, it was really obvious because you had a green one, a blue one, a brown one, a black one, a white one, and a red one, with the exact same secondary color scheme too. So it was not subtle.
All you need is a rogue one.
It was really not subtle at all. But that was kind of the beginning of that trend that we would see continuing for a significant amount of time. You finally start to see that break a little bit when we get to the Barraki, but it's really not until like 2006 that things start to really change. So this is the concept of 6 Toa heroes versus 6 enemies of the same or very similar color scheme, and that pretty much goes all the way through 2007 actually. The Bohrok originally retailed for $8, which I think is crazy.
How many pieces are they?
They're like 100 and something pieces, I think.
The Bohrok are 100 pieces?
I don't feel like that.
What are you talking
It's
about?
gotta be
I could be
like
wrong.
maybe 50.
Yeah.
look
Fact
at-
check that.
I will
really.
fact check it.
There's no way.
It says the Korok was 40 parts.
There you go, 40.
Mm-hmm.
So they're pretty simple, pretty small, and I imagine would have been easy to build a swarm of at the time. So I actually do like that. The Bohrok are built super similarly to each other. All 6 models are basically identical aside from color and their shield weapon hand pieces.
They're just called shields.
Yeah. The shields, they're like the only thing that's actually a different part. And everything else is the same part design with different colors. Like the shield on the top had different colored printing on it. Anyways, the Bohrok had 2 main play features. They could roll up into a ball by tucking in their arms and legs, and they're actually extremely fun to roll around.
I was gonna say it's honestly one of the coolest things that, like, design wise they ever did with Bionicle, because they work.
It's super satisfying.
Well, and it's really cool, like in the comics or in the concept art, because whenever they burst out of like their hives, they're always in the roll mode. And it's just like so dynamic.
It's pretty sick. And then the other ability that they had was they could kind of like explosively lunge their head forward by pressing this lever on the back, and it would kind of like launch out. And if you loosen the faceplate a little bit, you could press it and launch out, and then the Chrono would kind of like launch out with it. Mm-hmm. That feature did not really always work super well, but the face like punching feature worked really well.
The Chrono launching feature always felt like the squid launcher to me, where it's like it theoretically works.
Yeah, it sort of works, but not really. And then one other thing that's not really like a play feature of the sets, but is really cool, the canisters that the Bohrok came with this little like hook piece that you could attach to the top of the canister. And if you take the label off the canister, it was transparent plastic. So you could actually like hang the Bohrok from the lid of the canister in ball form, and it would like hook and hang there, and you could look in and see the Bohrok like hanging there.
That's sick.
It's actually super cool. I'm like, I don't know how they came up with that idea, but it's genius. So you wouldn't have that if you first bought it, but after you bought it and built it, you could like put it in like that.
I love the idea of the canisters being in lore and also having like cool fun uses in real life.
Yeah.
I think
it's really cool. So
phenomenal.
That was really sad, like only done with the Mata and then the Bohrok. The other feature of the Bohrok, of course, was the collectability feature, which came in the form of the Corona, which if you think masks are bad, boy howdy, you're in for a whole thing with the Corona. So the Bohrok, like the Toa and other sets, of course, the inside, the like faceplate thing, they had the Corona and they were all different. So like Thomas was saying, there were 8 different Corona. There were 8 different like design variants. And then they came in 6 different colors for the 6 different colored Bohrok, right? The 8 different forms were the Bo, the Ka, the Ja, the Su, the Vu, the Za, the Yo, and the Za.
Bros
There's
on that Za.
There's XA and ZA. I was like, wait, was
Wouldn't
I saying
that be
right?
the Sha and the
Sha.
Za?
I guess
Za,
Sha and
yeah.
Za, yeah.
Yeah.
The Corona were like really rubbery kind of in texture, and like a mask, they could be placed on the face of like the Toa or the Matoran. Like, so that is like the lore connection. And then like they had eye holes that would fit over the eye holes.
Well, and the other lore connection being, since they are so rubbery and weird, that reflects them being the first purely organic creature you see in the story.
Right. They would fit a lot more snugly than masks too. So like they would not easily come off. Which
they,
again,
they actually fit really well, which I was
Yeah,
cool.
They were
Which-
very satisfying
Yeah.
to
yeah,
put on.
it's interesting because it feels like it has that lore connection of like, it's almost like it's tight on there. Yeah. So yeah, they are very satisfying. They're just so fun to like feel and play with. They have a good texture.
The more we talk about it, the more I'm like, the Bohrok were really such phenomenal enemies, set-wise and lore-wise.
Yeah.
They were.
No major
They
downsides.
started off with a bang for sure. When you got a Bohrok set, it was random which variant of the Corona you were going to get. So you always knew which color you were going to get, but it was random what variant you were going to get, which is interesting because that's different from how the Toa masks worked, right? So like, let's say you got a Galak. You knew you were going to get an orange Corona, but you didn't know if it was going to be a Bo, a Ja, a Su, or whatever, right? It could be any of those. And then, so the Galak always came with orange, Bohrok came with green, Nuvok was lime green, Tanakh was blue, Levok was red, and Korok was light blue. Which, why they did green and lime green and blue and light blue, I have no idea. But that was just how it was, so... I mean,
Dark color
it's
choices.
fine, but... And then... and if you somehow manage to collect all 8 variants of all 6 colors, you are officially halfway there, because guess what? The Bohrok Va came with 6 different colors with 8 variants each. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
So the Va, and we'll get into the Va in a second, they came with, so Galak Va came with purple, Bohrok Va came with tan, Nuvok Va came with black, Tanakh Va came with yellow, Levok Va came with dark gray, and Korok Va came with white.
Wow.
So there were technically 12 different colors with 8 different variants each. And that's that's only talking about the original 2002 wave.
Yeah, because that's not including the
Because
Bohrok
that's not
call.
the Bohrok call,
Oh my gosh.
which is 6 more colors.
And that's weird, because the Bohrok Va don't wear Krana.
Yeah.
They just carry them.
Yeah, they
It's
just
like,
carry them.
So really quickly, when they were in the actual set, each Bohrok came with a Krana, right? But was that always the same style of Krana? Like, 'cause-
No.
So each set actually had a potential of having a different Krana
Yes.
in it. That's really weird. So I'm just trying to think of like the box art. What did it show in the, like, when you could see through the windshield, for as we've been calling it? What did it look like? Because
It would show one of the variants.
Okay.
Yeah, like it would.
I thought maybe they would just kind of like make it so
Just
you
make it an
can't quite
amorphous
see it.
blob,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Right.
No, it shows one of the variants pretty distinctly, but you would definitely get a different one in each one. And I'm not actually sure if the packaging indicates that you're going to get a different Chrono on each
I
one.
don't think
I don't
it
remember.
would.
But yeah, if Bricklink is to be believed, some of the sets didn't have the potential to come with every single variant of the Chrono. So you'd have to get Chrono packs to get all of them.
Yeah, I do. I believe I heard that before. And I
So
think
I'm
that's
not
true.
totally sure why they did that, or if that was just some sort of manufacturing error or what. But
I believe it was intentional because one of the core aspects of the story Bible is collectability, which is why they did the masks in the first place. And so they just ramped that up with Chrono because the mask packs and the Chrono packs, I believe, were some of their biggest money makers.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So the Chrono actually came in 2 pack variants. So there was a Chrono pack, and then there was also a Kanohi Chrono pack that came with both. And then there was also one more place that you could find Chrono, and that was in a limited edition 500-piece set from 2004. So 2 years later, it came out for some reason, and then came with some Chrono in it.
That's weird.
I know, it's so weird. I don't understand. They did some of those like sets that were literally just pieces, and then like they came with the weirdest parts for some reason. Like some of them had like exclusive pieces that only came in those like containers for some reason.
Bionicle was doing loot boxes and FOMO tactics
Yeah.
before it was cool.
Dude, it was crazy. Some of the products that came out in like 2001, 2002, 2003, it's just like, what were you guys doing? It's crazy.
They were making tons of money.
Yeah, hand over fist, honestly. So then that was the Bohrok, and then there were the Bohrok Va, which were they were like the equivalent of the Mictoran. They were the same price. So the Bohrok Va would sell for $3, which they were kind of filling in that like pocket change or like impulse buy kind of like gap. And they didn't come in canisters, they just came in little boxes. They were also like pretty similar to the Taraga from the 2001 wave. So they were like small, came in a box. Even like the style of build was pretty similar. The Bohrok Va actually, despite being so tiny, did have a play feature. So their heads were made from the Bohrok shields, like Thomas said before. So they had like one shield that kind of made up the top of their head, and then they had the Bohrok eyes. And if you pushed down on the head, it would launch the Chrono that was in like the backpack. It would kind of like fling it out.
That's actually cool.
Yeah. Again, didn't work super well,
Yeah.
but it worked technically well enough to be considered a play feature. So there you go. I mean, you can't really complain with a $3 set.
I will say one cool thing about the Bohrok Va, they looked so menacing and like different, right? It was like, ooh, this is interesting.
Another really interesting thing about the Bohrok Va is they came with so they all had like a tool that they used. But they were so varied because like 2 of them had like Taraga tools, and then 2 of them had Toa tools. So one of them had Golly's claws or Golly's hooks, and one of them had Onua's claws. The Korok Va just used the Bohrok toothpiece as its tools, and then the Levok Va used katanas.
No rhyme or
No
reason.
rhyme or reason to it at all. I mean, it looks kind of cool, but it's so weird. And then they also had some parts that are actually kind of hard to find. So they used Technic like joints and connectors in really unusual colors. So like lime green or brown or stuff like that. So, and then just having the exclusive colored the exclusive colored Chrono is just like, why? Why did they do this? But
Money.
yeah. Okay, so then the last set in this wave is, of course, Kadok and Gadok, the Balrog Queens. They were 2 kind of like dinosaur-looking creatures, like Thomas mentioned. Similar, but they had some differences to them. One was red, one was blue. The set retailed for $60, and it had a very similar function to the Muaka and Kainra that we talked about in our Rahi episode in 2001, where you could pull like this kind of trigger and it would launch the neck out and close the jaws at the same time. So it was this like feature where it would like kind of just lunge out and like bite, which was pretty cool. Despite being very strangely proportioned. They have like tiny feet and huge
Yeah.
heads, and like kind of like very U-shaped bodies. They were surprisingly sturdy and very posable. They were mostly Technic parts, but they did use some of the new Bohrok parts. What's interesting is they didn't have a ton of exclusive pieces, but they did have 2 pieces that were exclusive just to this set, and that is, get ready, this is a mouthful, Technic rotation joint socket with 3L lift arm thick in red and blue exclusive, or respectively.
What does that piece look like?
It is, so for the feet, it's where the like like on Knight's Kingdom they have like those click joints.
Oh yeah.
It's like that. It would click in there and like be able to rotate, and it was the socket for that then connected to the rest of the model. And yeah, so it only came in red and blue in that set. So if you want to rebuild the set, you would need those specific pieces. And then the other exclusive thing is the pearl dark gray hoses that they used for like their little like headpiece.
They're like antennas almost.
Yeah, they're like a little antenna. I don't know what the heck they're supposed to be, honestly, but
Was that piece necessary to build them, or was it just like a total flare?
it's necessary because it's literally where the feet connect to the rest of the body. So, I mean, you could build it potentially with a different color, but it would really throw off the color scheme.
Well, I was wondering, like, was there another design scheme they could have used, or was this the most efficient way to do it?
I don't think anyone at Bionicle was concerned about efficiency at that point in time.
Good point. They're too busy drowning in Krana money.
But it is just so weird that like that those are really the only exclusive parts from the whole set. So
It's interesting too because you said that retailed for $60. I'm thinking, man, that's a lot of money. But I'm looking at the listing on Bricklink, and it was 630 parts. So the 10 cents a piece has held over time.
That's crazy.
And so, like, or at least in that case, it still works, which I think that's pretty interesting.
you're lucky if you have that set too, because it goes for like 125, 150 bucks now on the low end. But yeah, that's Kodak and Godak. I was gonna say too, if this matters, the Bohrok were numbered 8560 through 8565, and the Bohrok Va were 8550 through 8555. So
Why is that interesting?
because it went from 0 to 5 for both. I just think that's interesting.
Like it went 0 to 5 for both, but it didn't go 0 to 5 and then 6 to 0 again.
Yeah.
Right? It went.
So was there anything that took up the slots in between?
Yeah, so the Kadok and Gadok are 8558. Well, actually, I guess that's after the Va. So that's after the Va, but before the Bohrok, which is weird.
That's very
And then
strange.
there were some other sets in there too that I forget what specifically they were, but yeah.
I guess I'd go to. I'm guessing the reason is because I said it would go to another 0, but it would actually go to a 1, right? Because you have 6, so you're including the 6 from the previous 10, and then you're moving up to a 1, and that seems weird to end your series on a 1, right?
Uh-huh.
And then have all the rest, and you're like, what do we do with all these numbers? So
Makes sense.
Oh, actually, the other thing I was going to say too. So the Bohrok, again, a little bit harder to find and not actually seen in the lore as far as I know, but the Bohrok also had combiners. So the Levok, I have to look up these names because I can never remember what they are. The Levok, Galok, and Korok had a combiner, which was called the Bohrok Kaida Jaw. And then the Parok, Nuvok, and Tanok had a combiner which was called the Bohrok Kaida Za. And these are super weird looking combiners. To be fair, the Kaida Za looks kind of cool. It's like this giant... It's...
like a
it reminds
muscle
me
man.
of like a muscle man.
It's
yeah.
a bodybuilder who skipped arm and leg day.
Literally, it's just pecs and abs.
Yep.
It's crazy. So, very strange looking creation, but also kind of cool depending on how you look at it. And then, apparently, there was a Japanese exclusive variant that was a combiner with the Korok and the Nuvok, which, not gonna lie, this one actually looks cool. It has wings made with the Nuvok bodies, and it's actually kind of cool. So why the heck this thing existed, I will truly never know.
Well, and it's strange because the Bohrok Kaita are possible in lore, but they're never seen. The Bohrok combiner between the Nuvok and Korok is not possible. That's like not a thing in lore,
Yeah.
as far as I know.
Yeah, it's really weird. And also you can make that same one, because since all the Bohrok are the same, you can make the same one with any Bohrok color, and it looks pretty cool. So,
Really bizarre.
yeah.
Lego was just doing anything.
Yeah. Anyways, that's the Bohrok.
You are now entering the community portion of the podcast. In this section, we showcase some of our favorite creations from talented and passionate members of the Bionicle fandom.
We have the Bohrok drawing by Just Rube on DeviantArt, which is very cool, in my personal opinion. Jafa on Reddit and Instagram has a Bohrok and Balrog redesign, and Jafa is someone that I have actually been following for a long time. Their mocks actually insane.
Oh yeah,
I mean, next level stuff.
the redesign is so slick, so neat.
Yeah.
It gives the Balrog each their unique like personality, and it's phenomenal.
It's really cool. I mean, go look at Jafa's stuff right now.
Cannot recommend enough.
And then you want to talk about the last one?
Yeah, so Josh Kim on Reddit has an Exotoa redesign that is so nice and like well put together. It's similar to the Manus crab redesign that we discussed on the Mata Nui episode, where it's just so much bigger and more imposing, but it can still fit the Toa inside and like fulfill the function. So it's, in my mind, the quintessential Exotoa armor. So with that out of the way, are there any closing thoughts?
I just really like the Bohrok.
Yeah.
I do. I never had like a huge affinity for them when I was a kid. Like, I think partially that's because we got into Bionicle a little later.
Yes.
I think we really started getting into Bionicle in like 2006.
Definitely Mari era.
Mari.
Mata Nui was my first experience.
Yeah, for me, I definitely was involved like during the Inika phase. Yeah, it wasn't until really later that we started getting into Bionicle. But then going back and reading all the books and the comics and things like that, I never really cared that much for the Bohrok, but they've definitely grown on me over time.
Oh yeah, doing research for this episode, my respect for the Bohrok went out the roof, and my respect for Kokoro went into the ocean. So
The Marianas Trench.
not even Golly could find my respect for Kokoro. But because I always liked the Bohrok Call more, because they were more evil and had like more of a personality. But like doing research and reading the basic Bohrok book, I'm like, I don't know, they're just so. They really hit that wonder and magic that the first few years did. It's like, why are these guys here, and why they're so possessed to complete their goal, right? It's just a great mystery that has a pretty good payoff.
Samuel, what did you learn from this episode?
Too much to recount.
So when you go to your friends and they're like, hey, Samuel, what is the Bohrok? You'll say,
I'll say go listen to our episode. It describes the whole thing.
excellent. Sponsored by Jacob Mulick's Bricklink store. Anyway, so that concludes today's episode. Thank you for tuning in and listening. Make sure to check out our next episode, which will be about Matoran and how they function in the universe, what they're made of, what their roles are.
And if you have any questions about anything, feel free to reach out to us. We're here.
This brings us to the end of today's podcast. If you enjoyed the discussion, please follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you like to watch instead of listen, you can also find us on YouTube. The Barraki Talk Show is only made possible thanks to viewers like you. Thank you.